Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Mr. Wolstenholme's Kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how I make homemade soup using homemade bone broth. Now, the main thing you're going to need for this recipe is you're going to need the carcass of a chicken, or a turkey, or any other living thing for that matter. Once living thing. So I got this rotisserie chicken the other day. I ate it, and whenever I get these chickens, I always like to keep the skin and the bones and everything, and I just stick it in the freezer for when I want to make soup, and then when I am ready to make soup, I take it out and throw it in the pot. I'm going to show you how you make your own bone broth. The first thing you're going to do is you're literally just going to chuck the carcass into a large pot, and you're going to put the heat all the way up on it. Mine's frozen. If yours isn't frozen, it'll take you less time, so congratulations. If it is frozen like mine, then just take a little bit more. You use your little spoon to stir it around. The goal here is you want to actually char it a little bit, so you want it to burn a little bit on the bottom, get those bones nice and crispy, a little bit of blackening on them, and then we're going to add our water and the rest of the ingredients for the bone broth once we get that charring. Okay, so I've been cooking this over high. You can see it's smoking a little bit, so I got my fan on. I'm just stirring it. It's got some charring, so I'm ready to add the water. And a lot of this water is going to evaporate off, so you don't need to give like a set amount of water. Just add some slowly. You don't want to pour it too fast on and have it explode in your face, but just add some water to it, and then you're going to stir it up. That's probably good. I filled my pot halfway with water. You can always add more later once it starts to evaporate, but we've got the chicken carcasses here in the water. You can see some nice charring there. That's what I wanted for it. So I'm just going to let this cook. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to bring it to a boil and keep it boiling for a couple hours here, actually. But now that the chicken is in there, I'm ready to add my vegetable scraps, and then I'll add a little bit of salt, and that's going to get it ready to cook into a nice bone broth. There's a couple things I really like about this recipe. The first is that it's very versatile. If you want to make a chicken noodle soup, it's great for that. If you want to make a curry, which is what I'll be making today with this, you can use that. Pretty much anything that requires broth, you can use this homemade broth recipe for, and it'll make your soup a little bit richer, I think tastier as well. The other thing that I like about it is that it lets you use your vegetable scraps instead of just throwing them away. So I keep a bag in the fridge whenever I peel carrots or onions or whatever produce, cut up peppers. Instead of throwing away the scraps, I typically put them in a Ziploc bag like this one. So I peeled a lot of carrots the other day, and I've got them in here. This is not quite enough for what I would like to put the broth, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut up the other vegetables that I'm going to put in my soup, like this onion, some garlic. I'm going to cut them up, and then I'm going to keep their peelings, the refuse from them, and I'm going to add that to the stock now. So I'm going to cut up these vegetables in advance, set them aside in a container in the fridge, and then I'm going to use the scraps to make my broth. Okay, I've got all my vegetables peeled and some of them chopped, but the important thing is I have my bag of peelings here. And remember, you can use any peelings that you have lying around. There's no specific vegetables that you need. I like to have at least some garlic and onion in there, but any other vegetable peelings will do as well. I just happen to be using these for a different recipe, and I'm going to use these for the broth. Okay, this chicken carcass has been boiling away while I've got my peelings ready, and now I'm just going to add them to the pot slowly so they don't splash. There we go. Oh, it's beautiful. So now I have this big pile of garbage here. It's not garbage though, it's beautiful, beautiful flavor and nutrients. I'm just gonna put it in there and I'm gonna stir my pot. And I'm just gonna bring it up to a boil and then put it on a low enough setting that it doesn't boil over, but that it stays bubbling. And I'm just gonna let this boil for about at least 2 hours. The only spice you need to add to this is salt. I'm adding 1 tablespoon of salt. And I'm going to stir that in. The reason you don't have to use other spices, you can if you want to, but you shouldn't need to because most of the flavoring is going to come from the chicken itself as well as all of the vegetable scraps that you put in. Okay, so I've let it simmer. It's been cooking. You can see it's got this nice rich color to it. I just took some out with this spoon and tasted it, and it tastes good. It's got a good flavor, so it's time for me to strain it, and then I will have my bone broth. So the way I'm gonna strain this is I have one of these fine mesh strainers, and I'm gonna put it in a bowl in the sink. You don't want to spill this all over the floor. And then I'm gonna carefully pour this pot into this through the strainer. Now, if you don't have a fine mesh strainer like this, what you'll have to do is you'll have to use probably a measuring cup, and you'll just have to, skim it off the top and pour it in and do it that way. That's probably your best bet. But hopefully if you're making this, you have access to a fine mesh strainer. And there it is. We have turned this pile of garbage, a chicken carcass and vegetable peelings, into this rich, delicious, nutritious bone broth. That's how it's done. I use my bone broth for pretty much anything that I cook that can use it. I use it to make rice. I use it to make chicken noodle soup. I use it to make curries. You can use it for whatever. And if you want to save some for later, you can can it in a jar, or you could put it in a container and freeze it. If you just stick it in the fridge, it'll last about a week before it starts to go bad. Hope it works out for you, and I hope you enjoy it.